Hey everybody, welcome back to my coverage of the PogChamps 3 tournament. This is the final group stage match, Ludwig versus MoistCritical in Group D, and this will determine the seeding for the championship bracket. Both of them have already moved on to the championship bracket, but this will just determine who they will play, and also who wins the group stage. So without further ado, this is going to be a very evenly matched match. Both players have been playing chess for around a year now, and they both have similar ratings, so we just have to see who will come out on top. MoistCritical has the white pieces for the first game, and he starts with e4. We have d5 from Ludwig, and e takes d5. Queen takes d5, and we have a Scandinavian defense. Knight c3 and queen back to d6. This is one of the main moves, so good job to Ludwig for that. We have d4 and now knight f6 from Ludwig, knight f3, and now a6 from Ludwig, which is a playable move. I would have preferred a developing move, but a6 is also a totally fine move as well. You know, this a6 and also c6 pawn pushes are very common and very thematic in the Scandinavian defense for black. So yes, the a6 is also a totally fine move. We have bishop d3 and now knight c6 from Ludwig, and this is attacking this pawn twice. So here MoistCritical thinks he needs to defend it, and he plays knight e2, but here you can actually just castle. And the thing is, if Ludwig tries to take this pawn with knight takes d4, this actually loses at least a piece after knight takes d4, and now the queen cannot take back, because if you take back with the queen, then there's bishop b5 check, and the queen will be lost. So you don't actually need to defend this pawn here as MoistCritical, but he does so anyway with knight e2. We have bishop g4 now from Ludwig, and bishop f4 from MoistCritical, gaining a tempo on this queen. Ludwig saves the queen with queen to d7, and we have c3 now, just solidifying this center. Here, Ludwig does have the option to take this knight and double white's kingside pawns, which might be something you want to do, especially since white has already pushed this c3 and d4 moves. The white king will have to castle queenside and play king b1 and maybe even king a1 later to get off of this weak diagonal. So it will take a very long time to make white's king safe if you go for this bishop takes f3. So will Lud go for it? No, he doesn't. He instead simply castles queenside, which is totally fine as well. But it is just important to be aware of this positional idea here as black. We have h3 now from MoistCritical, and this is actually inviting this bishop takes f3 move. So now will Ludwig go for it? No, instead he goes for bishop h5, and we have castles from MoistCritical. And here you really do not want to castle queenside, because there's still this bishop takes f3 positional threat ripping open your kingside. And also now that you've pushed this h3 move, this pawn is now overworked defending both the knight and the pawn. So here you can actually win a pawn and get a really good attack as black after bishop takes f3, g takes f3, and queen takes h3. So this would definitely be very good for black. Will Ludwig go for it though? No, instead he plays e6, and so yeah, a bit of a missed chance there from Ludwig. We have g4 now from MoistCritical, so yeah, you probably don't want to be pushing your pawns in front of your king like this. I've noticed this is a mistake that a lot of these beginner competitors make in PogChamps. They push the pawns in front of their king because they don't understand the long-term weaknesses that doing so does to your position. So we'll just see if MoistCritical gets punished for this later on. However, we have a spicy move, very spicy move here from Ludwig, which is knight takes g4. And yeah, so Ludwig sacrifices a piece for 2 pawns to rip open white's king, which might be a little dubious, especially since, you know, it might take a while for you to get your other pieces over to the king side to start an attack. But we'll see if it works out for Ludwig. We have h takes g4 and bishop takes g4, and now knight g3. MoistCritical just wants to make sure his king is perfectly safe. We have bishop d6 here from Ludwig, and this allows MoistCritical to trade, which he is totally okay with since he is on the defense and up in material. We have bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, and now bishop back to e2 from MoistCritical. We have f6, just breaking this pin. That was the point of bishop to e2. We have f6 now from Ludwig, and I'm not exactly sure what this move was doing, but maybe he's just looking to advance this g5 and h5 to get a pawn storm with pawn storm to white's king. We have queen b3 from MoistCritical, now going on the counterattack to black's and also just developing the queen, connecting the rooks. So a fine move here from MoistCritical. We have h5 now from Ludwig, and Ludwig is continuing his plan of his pawn storm. Knight e4 now from MoistCritical, and this is attacking the queen and also looking to bring the knight over to the queen side to threaten checkmate. We have queen f4 from MoistCritical, and now this counterattacks. This actually forks both of these knights. So here you have to play knight c5 as MoistCritical to threaten checkmate, so white does not have time to take this knight, which MoistCritical does, so very good. And here there's only one way to defend as black, that's very good, which is knight to a5, which Ludwig does. And here MoistCritical plays queen to a4. Now attacking this knight, looking to kick it away and maybe threaten checkmate again. However, this is actually a huge mistake. So MoistCritical here is thinking, okay, my knight is still hanging, but if I attack your knight, you can win a piece here, but then I'll get your knight in the end. However, this doesn't actually work after bishop takes f3, and queen takes f3, queen takes a5, and rook to a6. So there is this pawn fork, but it doesn't work because queen takes a6 is a check, and it will actually lead to checkmate. So you can't go for this pawn fork, but rook to h6 is just going to be crushing as black. The white king is going to have a lot of problems, and black just can't save. White can't get any of his pieces over to help his king in time. So this would have been a winning continuation from Ludwig. So will we see it from him after queen to a4? Well, we do start with bishop takes f3, and after bishop takes f3, now Ludwig unfortunately goes for b6, just defending his knight and also attacking this knight. But it's not really attacking this knight, because if you ever take this knight, then white will get your knight for free. So here MoistCritical should definitely save his bishop, and now once again, if Ludwig takes this knight, then MoistCritical will get Ludwig's knight on a5 for free, and Ludwig's king will also be very exposed. So will MoistCritical save his bishop or do something else? Well, MoistCritical does not save his bishop. Instead, he goes for this fork with knight takes e6, which is not as strong because you do win the rook in the end, but you are losing this bishop, which is really the only piece that's defending your king right now, and you're also losing your knight. So you're giving up two pieces for the rook, and also two very active or very important pieces for this rook, which is not really doing too much for black right now. We do have this continuation from Ludwig with queen takes f3 and rook takes d8, or knight takes d8, rook takes d8, and I mean, white is up in exchange, but white's king is totally unsafe, so this is still anybody's game. We have rook a to e1, getting that rook on the open file, very good from MoistCritical, and king b7. Here, Ludwig could have forced a draw if he wanted to with queen g4 check, and he can just continue giving checks forever, and it will eventually be a draw by threefold repetition. So he could have gone for this if he wanted to. He would get the white pieces in the next game, and so he could have gone for that if he wanted to. But Ludwig wants to play for more. He wants to play on, so we have king b7 instead. And this draw is available for a few moves for Ludwig here. We have rook e7 from MoistCritical, just getting that last rook into the game, and g5 from Ludwig. Ludwig advancing his pawns to try to attack white's king. We have queen c2 from MoistCritical and knight c6. Ludwig getting that knight back into the game. Rook to f7, attacking this f6 pawn, and maybe looking to bring. Well, also it's just getting the rook out of attack. And we have g4 from Ludwig's. However, this actually allows a fork, which MoistCritical does find with queen to h7, and this forks the f pawn and the h pawn. So once these kingside pawns fall for black, it's going to be very hard to get some counterplay, and black will just be down too much material. So can Ludwig save everything? Well, that is assuming MoistCritical finds the best continuation. First, we start with rook to c8 from Ludwig, so just saving the c pawn here. And MoistCritical does pick up this h pawn, queen takes h5. We have knight d8, and now rook g7, saving the rook again. We have knight e6 now, attacking the rook one more time, and queen takes g4. So you don't have time to take the rook because you hang your queen, and if you trade queens, then the rook is saved. So Ludwig does trade queens here. Queen takes g4 and rook takes g4, and white is now up in exchange and a pawn. So this is a totally winning endgame for white. Let's see if MoistCritical can convert this or if he blunders back to Ludwig. We have f5 from Ludwig and rook to h4, saving that rook. Rook g8 check, and now king h1. The white king has no safety, but black just does not have enough pieces to checkmate the white king right now, or take advantage of this openness. We do have knight g5, however, and MoistCritical does pin this knight to this rook with rook to g1. Definitely the right call because you're up in material here, so you definitely want to go for trades, and this pin will force a trade. Ludwig recognizes this, and he realizes he needs to get out of this pin, and he's not going to be able to avoid a trade. So he goes for knight to f3, which is a fork, but here MoistCritical doesn't lose any material after rook takes g8 and knight takes h4. It's just an even trade. We have king g1 now activating that king in the endgame, and knight to f3 check. King g2 and knight e1 check. King g3 now going after this f pawn, and knight to d3 check, now pressuring this f2 pawn. So the white king will not want to leave this f2 pawn. We have rook to f8 now pressuring the f pawn again, and Ludwig saves it with f4 check. Now we have king to g4, so leaving the defense of this f pawn. And here is MoistCritical, you definitely, or sorry, here is Ludwig, you definitely want to pick up this f pawn. That way there are no more kingside pawns left. Your king can stay on the king side, and I think you'll have a much better chance at drawing this when there are only pawns on one side of the board, since the king is a very slow piece. But instead we have simply king to c6 from Ludwig, and here a very, or not yet actually, sorry. I thought this was, I thought that MoistCritical was going to play a nice move here, but it happens later. You'll just have to wait. We just have f3 here from MoistCritical so far, and now king d5 from Ludwig. And here's the move that I was waiting for. I thought it happened to move earlier, but it happens now. And it's rook takes f4. So MoistCritical, realizing that even though this knight is defending this pawn, if he trades his rook for this knight, he'll be up 2 pawns, including this passed pawn, and it will be a winning king and pawn endgame. So here as Ludwig, you kind of have to take this rook. I mean, it's your best chance anyway. So he does go for knight takes f4, and we have king takes f4. And here we have king e6. And here as MoistCritical, the best continuation would have simply been to play king g5, outflanking the black king. And now if king f7, we could have king f5, grabbing the opposition. And eventually white would be able to make it to one of these 3 key squares and be able to promote the pawn. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll link a video in the card where I talk about this endgame. But yeah, this is a very commonly known endgame, and white could have won this very easily with this continuation. However, we have king e4 from Ludwig, or from MoistCritical, which is still winning because it is grabbing the opposition, and also white is just up 2 pawns here. We have king d6 now, and here once again you have a chance to outflank the black king, and eventually white will make it to one of these 3 key squares and promote the pawn. But instead we simply have f4 from Ludwig, which if these queenside pawns did not exist, then this f4 move would be a draw. However, since the queenside pawns do exist and MoistCritical is also up a pawn, or has this queenside majority is what I meant, then this is still winning for white. We have king e6 now, and now f5 check, king f6, king f4. Once again, now that the king is behind the pawn, this isn't the cleanest technique, but it is still winning. We have king f7, and now king e5, king e7, f6 check, king f7, king f5, king f8, and king e6, king e8, f7 check, king f8, and now king f6. And if, once again, these pawns did not exist, then this would be a draw by stalemate. But black still has pawns to move, so it's not a draw yet. We have c6 from Ludwig, and here as white, the best plan, or the fastest plan to win is you basically make a passed pawn on the d file and then promote to a queen, and that would be checkmate. But we have king e6 from MoistCritical, so maybe he will sacrifice this pawn to eat up these pawns and then promote one of his queenside pawns. We have c5 from Ludwig, and now b3. Once again, simply d5 would have been the quickest win here. But we have b3 from Ludwig, or from MoistCritical, which is still winning, and a5 from Ludwig. We have now d5 from MoistCritical, which is definitely winning, and b5 from Ludwig. Ludwig, if he ever plays this king b7 or king g7 move, then MoistCritical can always play king e7 and promote on the next move. We have d6 now from Ludwig. MoistCritical, we have d6 from MoistCritical and b4 from Ludwig. D7 from MoistCritical, and b takes c3 from Ludwig. once again, here the fastest win would simply to play king f6, stalemate the black king, and then promote to a queen the next move with checkmate. But instead, we have simply the immediate d8 equals queen, which is check. And after king g7, we have queen f6 check, king f8, and queen back to e7 check. Here, white had a few checkmates. They could have played queen to h6, which is checkmate, or also queen to h8, which is checkmate. But, you know, anything wins here as white, as long as you don't eat up all of black's pawns and stalemate. So we have queen e7 check, and after king g7, MoistCritical makes another queen with f8 equals queen, and we have king g6, queen f6 check, king h5, queen e g7, which this would be stalemate if black didn't have pawns, but black does have pawns, so we have c2 now from Ludwig, and queen f to h6, which is checkmate. So MoistCritical takes the first game, and yeah, we'll just have to see if Ludwig can bring it back in the second game and bring us to an Armageddon, or if MoistCritical will shut out Ludwig and win the D group. So yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say about this game or this match. Thank you for watching, and stay awesome. Check out my PogChamps 3 playlist up there, and check out the next game in this match over there. I love you guys, and I'll see you next time.